Hey everybody, and welcome to a finally new episode of Design Cinema. This is Feinsu speaking, and this is episode 86, camera placement. So before I get started, let me just address why there hasn't been a new episode for so long. It's because I've been, for the past few months, been busy setting up a new company, a production company. Unfortunately, I can't talk about it too much for the time being because all the projects we are currently involved in are under heavy non-disclosure, so I'll probably reveal that sometime next year. But anyways, that's what I've been doing. It's quite exciting stuff, and I can't wait to tell you guys what we're doing with this new studio. But it's not school related or anything like that, so there's no need to speculate if we're doing, like, say, online school or things like that. It's nothing to do with the school. It's doing what I love doing, which is designing and producing things. So anyways, let's get on with this episode. Before I start recording this as well, I have a really bad cough. So I might be pausing to just not record the coughing. But unfortunately, I'll probably sneak in a couple of coughs here and there where I try to suppress that by drinking a lot of tea. So I apologize in advance if you hear me drinking tea as I start recording this, as I'm about to do right now. All right, so camera placement, because I thought let's do a new episode. I haven't done one in a while. Let's give you guys a really in-depth episode about, well, not that in-depth, but a lot more in-depth than probably some of the stuff I've done previously. So this episode, there's no drawing involved. It's a series of slideshows that I've created for you guys to talk a little bit more about when we do a scene. How do you choose a camera? Because sometimes, especially students, they tend to just start to paint. They forget about the importance of camera. And for this episode, let's go through that. So I'm going to be opening up a series of slides here to talk about that. So man, I got to really fight this cough. I'm trying not to cough for you guys right now, but let me take another sip of tea here. Due to the setting up a new company, I've been traveling non-stop, and I caught some flu sometime last month, and it still is on me right now. All right, so let's talk about what we're gonna do. So let me just turn this slide back on. So this is all in real time, by the way, because there's no drawing, so I'm just turning images on and off. Yeah, so back to the in-depth thing. The camera placement is a key element in setting up a scene. And so what I'm gonna do this episode is, let's start out with a theme, all right? I picked a game called Baldur's Gate. It's for those who grew up on the PC in the 90s, you guys probably recognize this game. It's a defining RPG for BioWare. I think this is their second game, but their first game in the realm of RPG, role-playing games, which I think defined a lot of role-playing games that followed in its path. I think Baldur's Gate, Ultima, and a few other games kind of set the trend for what modern RPGs, at least Western RPGs, tend to do. Anyways, I think it's a great title. If you guys haven't played it, go check it out. You can buy this right now. Let me take a sip of water here. You can buy this right now from GOG.com. By the way, they're not sponsoring this or anything like that. It's they're just a great site. And by the way, GOG is the same company that makes The Witcher 3, so CD Projekt, and they've been quite good to us as well. We have a few students or graduates of ours working over there currently on stuff like Witcher. So anyways, you can pick it up. They have an enhanced edition. We'll work on modern PCs and check it out. It's a great game. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use their old design as a re-HD. Say they're going to make this game into a new one. How will we design some of their interesting sets? And I picked this spider set over here. Let me start a new layer here so I can do some notes. This is just Photoshop, so it's pretty standard here. Okay, so over here, let me move the mic slightly here. Hopefully this is not going to screw up my audio. Okay, so this is an old design, I believe, from 1998, which is a spider layer. I thought it was really interesting. It was really creepy the first time I got in here, and of course got killed by the dozens, well, that's not dozens, maybe there were 5 or 6 spiders in here. But this game was really hard. For those who have never played it, this game back in the days, they don't hold you in hand, so you just go in there and pretty much die if you're not prepared. But I thought the design was really memorable. So what we do if we have to HD the scene? And let's treat this exactly how we'll do it for real projects. The company, in this case, this is BioWare. They're going to make this game, say, into a 3D kind of maybe first-person RPG using the same title as Baldur's Gate in the same world. And we're going to revisit a lot of these familiar locations, but now, of course, in 3D, similar to Skyrim or Dragon Age. As I take another drink. So I apologize again. I'm going to be drinking a lot of tea here to suppress any kind of coughing. So bear with me here, guys. All right, so what we're going to do is first, of course, we got to design this sucker. And I'm going to start with some reference images. Okay, and these are things we're looking at here. It's a spider cave, so the obvious choice would be to look at spiders first, and I picked a couple of very creepy ones. So this episode, again, it's not about design, it's about camera placement, but we need a design as an example of how to place those cameras. Okay, so I started with some pretty creepy looking spiders. You got this one over here. That guy is extremely creepy. There's some spiders here. And just started with some standard caves, some balls of baby spiders, and spider webs all over these trees. It's a cool image. And I also have another one that follow-ups after this one. Here's number 2. This is more for the layer itself. For example, you see some of the basket designs on top here. So those are generally done for, let's see, let me point those out here, over here, right? For the layer layout, as you see here in this original drawing or design here. It's kind of almost like a basket weaving type of design, and from the outside it is obviously a dome. Now, if we're making a new IP or making a 3D version of this, we don't necessarily have to keep this design, but we definitely don't want to piss off the clients either by completely changing it that it's unrecognizable. Because, you know, if we are going to use Baldur's Gate as a title, we want the player to see this place and remember the experience they had perhaps in 98. But we do need to HD it and make it cooler for those who haven't played this game, that they wouldn't really care about the original version. So we do need to try to address at least hopefully some of this design here. And that's where reference number, this page comes up, in which I have these nests, baskets for that. I thought these roots look quite cool. I really thought that this is interesting, this splashing of milk or liquid in slow motion. Here's some chocolate, creating some nice shapes over there. Looking at a couple of these are termites. Let me just zoom in here, right? Termite queens on their layers, and this cutaway of the layer looks really, really interesting. And I'll actually be using that later on in some of the designs. But the texture here is great because you have. Let's take a look at the original and just kind of discuss what's over there. Let's see if I lost my original. Okay, here we go. Okay, so if you look at the original design here, zoom in. We have this really chubby, crazy looking dude here. He's not a spider, but I'm gonna try to design him so maybe he's a little bit like a spider. But he's sitting in the middle of this dome-like structure. And so we're gonna make him at least some kind of figurine. In the original game, by the way, he cannot attack you, I believe. Only his spiders can. So after you kill off all his spiders, which you can see in the screenshot, they're all dead here. He is pretty much a sitting duck, and you could just beat it on him until he dies. So we want to make him a slow-looking, a bag of flesh, essentially, a termite queen or a insect queen, or spiders don't really have queens, I guess. But I'm going to try to get that feeling of a termite queen over here into my design here as we turn it into 3D. But what really interests me in this shot are these organic, almost a peanut-shaped holes formed in the termite mound. I thought these are great design, very interesting shapes. All right, so let's actually get to the heart of this project or this episode, which is the camera placement. So this is the kind of stuff you guys can review previous episodes, for example, of how to design, how to sketch. I'm just skip that. And as I take another drink here, this is really difficult, by the way, trying to speak without coffee. All right, let's talk about our lens. So I'm gonna kind of put this one aside here. All right, the start of really what we're talking about. Now, before we even design anything, let's talk about the type of cameras we could use to shoot this scene. And so this is going to be a little bit of photography lesson here because it's the same thing. If you think about what we're doing in design, we're essentially emulating a 3D camera or even a real film camera that you'll see on set for a movie. So we have to understand a little bit about how cameras work. Just you don't have to know in the excuse me here, let me take a sip here. Now, you don't have to know enough to be a professional photographer, but it's definitely, I think, a key element in understanding how we set up a scene. Whoa, I like that cough come out here. So let's start with the first lens. Ultra wide. So this is a 14mm lens, 14mm Canon lens. So I actually have this lens. This lens is really, really awesome. So what a wide angle does is that it shoots a lot more of the scene. As you can see, here's an example I grabbed off the internet, off of Google. This is a street scene here, and you can see just how much stuff you see. Now, the advantage of this is that, yes, you get to see a lot of the scene. The disadvantage is that it distorts a lot of the image. For example, the images, the buildings back here, they're so small that you can't really see them anymore. This is due to the distortion effect of this lens because it's taking up so much information fit into the same diameter of lens, then you get automatic distortion. The perspective is extremely heavy in this scene. This also results in the fisheye effect, which you see here, right? That this is not how the humans perceive the world. However, the advantage here is that you can fit a lot of stuff into the scene. So depending on what we're trying to do, a wide angle lens, or in this case, an ultra wide, could come into play. But this is quite rare. Ultra wide is really, really wide angle, and it's a heavy distortion and very difficult to paint stuff back here because the foreshortening disappears extremely fast. As you can see, this building is this big. The next one over is a quarter of his size, and the one over there is a quarter of this guy. So we're talking about extreme perspective pushing here, and that's not ideal sometimes depending on what you're trying to do. Okay, let's move to the next camera lens we could use, which is a standard wide angle. This is a 24mm lens, and this is also a wide angle lens like the previous one, in which you can fit a lot of stuff into the lens, but less distortion. This still has quite a bit of foreshortening. As you can see, the cars here, this black car here is this big. By the time we get to, say, even the red one, it's about half the size. So you're talking about a pretty fast reduction in proportions or foreshortening, but it is still within reason. And most likely, this is the lens I'll be using for the shot we are doing. Okay, so this is a kind of, every artist or every designer has a preference to lenses. For me, I'm generally always sticking to about 24mm for most of my concept pieces. Some like wide or very long lenses, which I'll show you guys in a second here. Okay, let's go to the next one here. Let's go to a 50mm. So a 50mm lens is very much mimicking what we see as a human eye. So this is a close to human, and here's another example of that. So this is sort of what you see if you're just looking around with your own eyes, and a 50mm could capture that quite well. Now, the downside of that is that our vision, our cone of vision, or how much we can see, is actually not very limited. We're not like, say, a rabbit or maybe even an insect, in which they have a much wider cone of vision. They can see a lot more to their sides, whereas we can only see pretty much to our front at about 60 degrees or 50 degrees focus point. So if we're showing off a big scene, which we're doing with a Baldur's Gate spider nest design, this camera might not be ideal because it gets us too little of the information. Now, let's go to the last one here. Let's take another drink. Is a very flat lens. So this will be a telephoto lens, right? So by the way, let's review this. This is called an ultra wide. We got a wide, we have a standard, and this is telephoto. So this is a 200. This is the holy grail, I think, of most people who own the Canons. They would like to have this lens, and I highly recommend this lens as well. It's a beautiful lens, especially for shooting portraits from far away. I think a 50 is also quite good for portraits as well, but the 200 is just a beautiful lens. So what this lens does, it actually flattens and get rid of all perspective, because you can see here with the wide, super wide, the ultra wide, perspective is really heavy. As you get to wide, the perspective is still pretty heavy, but it's starting to lessen. As you get to the standard, the perspective is very, very normal at this point, normal according to a human eye, right? As you can see, the foreshortening of these 2-point perspective is very, very normal. As we get to a 200mm, okay, this is a 200mm lens here, perspective is essentially gone. And you can see this shot here of the Japan earthquake or tsunami a few years ago. These buildings, this guy versus that guy, versus this guy over here, they're almost the same size, even though this building to this building, their distance is actually about 4 buildings apart, but their shrink in terms of how they scale is almost the same. Because what this camera does is that it pretty much gets rid of all perspective. It flattens the scene. And there's a use for this camera. If, for example, we want to show a mountain scene, a castle in the mountains, well, a 200mm will make a beautiful flat shot in which you get the mountains, the castle, the clouds all in the same shot without distortion. And you see a lot of nature photographers, for example, used it to shoot animals in Africa. So you get the elephants, the sunset, the trees, the beautiful clouds, and all of it makes a flat, almost like a what you would call like a portrait painting, versus a heavy perspective lies image that you see above with these lenses. Okay, more tea. I'm gonna be drinking probably 2 cans of tea by the time I'm finished with this episode. So now, depending on the scene you choose, you could choose these cameras. For me, for this particular episode of the spider, I guess a mount or a spider cave, I think I'm gonna choose the wide. This is my save camera. This is the one I use for pretty much everything. So 200s again comes in for flattening perspective. If you have a scene that doesn't require too much perspective, again showing a castle in the epic valley, 200 or even a 400 is a perfect lens for that. I don't use 50s too much. I like to give my perspective a little bit of flair, so I go to maybe a 24 or maybe a 35. That gives me still a bit of distortion, a little bit more heavy perspective. The ultra wide, let's just review, is really rare. You would use this probably for something like, say, a aircraft carrier or a giant space station, something that just wouldn't fit in the standard 50 or even a 200. There's no way it'll fit in a 200. So it'll make the shot very dynamic. Now, can an aircraft carrier fit in a telephoto? Of course it can. But what it does is it flattens it. So you can still put a giant spaceship here, a big one that's 1 kilometer wide. It'll fit, but it'll look very flat and might not give it scale. So it just, again, depends on what you want to do. You can study more about cameras on your own. Of course, this is just a really quick preview, but it's good to understand this before you even start the drawing. Going back to our students, for example, they sometimes draw things that are impossible to capture. They are eyeballing their camera, for example. So they can mix a 200 millimeter lens background into, for example, a wide angle, ultra wide shot. The two is essentially impossible. I'll make an example using this image here. For example, this is a super wide or an ultra wide. If we're to put a mountain back here, which this looks like California to me, by the architecture here. Well, no idea, but the palm trees kind of give it away. You can actually see some mountains way back here, right? You can see it. You can just barely pick out that pixel back here, right? There's some mountains back here. That's probably like Mount Wilson or San Gabriel Mountains in California, which is about, I think, about 2,000 feet high. Maybe it goes as far as 4,000 feet high. But let's just call this one, say, 2,000. Now, because the heavy perspective for shortening that's happening here, even if you put a 4,000 feet mountain, it's probably right about here. Okay, maybe not even that far, but probably about here, maybe double the height, right? So 4,000, but it's not even double because of foreshortening of the camera. It's probably around here somewhere. So we go to a 10,000 feet mountain. We're talking about maybe something like that, like something you see in Denver, Colorado, right? Like something like that with this lens. Okay, so what happens is sometimes students will use this wide angle lens and putting, for example, a photo of a snowy mountain back here. Okay, for this mountain to exist, this mountain has to be ginormous. It's probably higher than Mount Everest, because if this is 2,000 feet, this is 4,000. This is probably 10, 20, 30, maybe 40, something like that, right? 50. I think Mount Everest is something like 50,000 feet or something like that. So this will be like a Mount Everest type mountain in the scene. And for the student, I ask them, is that how big the mountain is back there? And they're like, no, it's a standard mountain. Well, in this shot, that will be incorrect. And you might get that approved by the art directors. Hold on for a second. It might be approved by the art directors, but it might be impossible to make in 3D, to replicate for the 3D artists. They're going to have to cheat the background. And in today's games, in which everything is 3D, it'll be very hard to achieve that effect, because that mountain will literally have to be the size of Mount Everest, and it will be too giant. So that's a case in which camera or basic camera understanding is affecting the design. Okay, let's go to our next scene here, which talks about the placement of the camera. So start the divider. So now we talked about lenses, let's talk about where we could put it. Okay, so first one is our low angle. Okay, we have chosen, let's just go back and review here. I've chosen to put in a 24. Okay, we're using this lens right here, the 24. But where do we put it? Well, this is pretty important, because as a human being, you have to think about the camera as a actual cameraman. It really helps you think about where the camera is placed. So I'm going to choose a few that is ideal for the type of scenes we are doing. So first one is low angle. So you put a tripod, a baby tripod, you put a camera on it, it captures low angle. And this gives you sort of an epic scene. Like, for example, here's a scene of a fire. By putting the camera low to the ground, we tend to look upwards towards the sky. The perspective is foreshortened, and this is also a wide angle lens. Therefore, the trees are distorting to a third point perspective here. Gives it a very epic, grand scale, and there's use for that. If you're doing a big boss character, you're doing a big dragon flying over a scene, this is a very ideal camera because it puts you at a low position. It gives whatever you have up here a sense of mass and power. Okay, next one, a standard lens. Okay, so this is the height of the average human. So this tripod is placed probably about 5 feet up, 5.5 or 6 feet up. So this camera gives you eye level. So here's a shot of some SWAT team guys, and you can see that the horizon line is exactly where their eyes are. So this shot is used a lot by, for example, in films. If you look at a movie, say Saving Private Ryan, the majority of the movie was shot at eye angle because Steven Spielberg wanted you to be part of the soldiers. You want to be part of the group. So by placing the camera always at standard eye level, you feel like you're always with the soldiers. So he didn't do too many shots in which the camera is below or way above. I think in the entire Private Ryan, there's only a few high crane shots. Majority of the film is shot from POV. Right, we call this point of view because the horizon and the eye line are exactly at the same level. Whereas, for example, this one, the one on top, is not. A human being standing here is about maybe what, something like that. So his eye line and your horizon, which is down here, are not in the same alignment, resulting in an epic scale. Okay, so this is a standard position and achievable with a tripod. Okay, now we have high angle. Okay. So this requires equipment because both of these, the low angle and the standard, you could do with a tripod or just with you holding the camera. But a high angle shot, you either need equipment or you have to climb yourself up to, say, a cliff or a building to shoot these scenes. And here are some examples that you can see here. Down here we have, I grabbed this from Google here. They're shooting that from the Mad Max movie. So this will be a crane. So the camera's way above the average height. Here's the human right here. So use this generally to establish something. Here's back to the Japan tsunami shot again. This shot is shot from a helicopter, which is seen from over here, or airplane. It gives you an overview of the location. It's really good for establishing things by using the crane. So if we're doing an establishing shot, perhaps a crane could come into view. So, or you could combine, for example, wide angle and crane shot, and you get a nice epic shot here, and you get an establishing shot here. And this is all up to you to choose. I need more drink here. Of course, nowadays with drones, you can also capture high angle crane shots with the drone, which is being done a lot nowadays. Okay, so let's talk about camera placement real quick. Boink. All right. I'm using this kind of a World War I, I think, or World War II example I found in the net. I thought it was quite appropriate for thinking about camera, which is put yourself there. Okay, pretend you are looking through the lens. Where would you be on the set? Are you going to be a low angle shot, okay, in which your horizon is very, very low to the ground, so therefore anyone above you will appear bigger than you? Here's a half bent, basically in between, so you're here but the person is still above you. So this will be ideal. For example, you're doing a shot of a king, someone with power, and they're looking down on you. So you're going to do a POV. The cameraman is afraid to stand up against the king, so we're going to put the camera here, and this is an eye-to-eye shot. The last one I haven't included, of course, is the crane shot. And crane shot probably not ideal for someone like a king, at least the first time you see him, because now you're saying, hey, the king's not that powerful because he's below my eyesight. So we'll probably start a shot of a king using this camera right over here, and then later on switch to this one. All right, so that's a little bit about camera placement. Now let's actually put all this into practice. Okay. All right. So I've skipped a bunch of stuff and I actually designed this set ahead of time. Just the spider nest. Where'd it go? Over here somewhere. Boink. Ooh, not that one. Let's turn this one. All right. So I spent about an hour or so, and I already designed this out because I need that design to go to the next part of this tutorial, and that is over here. Whoops, not that one. Over here. Okay. So this is a cutaway of the set that I have designed and chosen for the final production. And what I've done here is drew this as if it's a model, okay, like a little kit, or even a live set. For example, for movies, they will build something like this, a 1-to-1 scale model. The rest of this might be a green screen, for example, and over here is where the actors could act. Now, this is a video game, so well, it doesn't matter. The thinking is the same. So essentially, treat this like a set. Therefore, you can start visually brainstorming where the camera could be placed versus you're in a void, your scenes floating in a void. And it's very hard to kind of ground your camera positioning. So by doing this, it helps. And of course, you don't have to draw it this elaborate. You could just draw a very quick drawing. And that's what we have our students here do as well, which is once they design their set, they'll draw this little quick thumbnail of what their set looks like, and then use that to plan camera. And so let's do that here. Okay, let's start out with the same cameras that we used earlier, which is the first one, remember, is the low angle. Okay, remember, boom, 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 right? Low angle, standard. Oops, got some bunch of notes up here. Oh, that was mixed in. Low angle, standard, and crane. Okay, we're gonna go in that order of camera placement. So here's our set, as if it's built by, say, Weta, right? They have these bigger chairs or a live set, and let's place in the low angle. So number one, so low angle goes, what it does, shows big scale, it's powerful, it's epic, and the camera is placed very, very low. In this case, I put an arc here. As you can see, this arc pretty much defines where this camera most likely should go, because it doesn't make much sense to put the camera behind this guy to shoot a low angle, because you're going to lose the design of this queen character. Excuse me. Right, so ideally it's going to be somewhere in the front, and you probably have this much playroom to place the camera, either directly in front or to either side. And we're going to shoot this scene, and it's going to capture a very wide shot of this nest with the whatever this queen king thing in the middle is, and it'll give it quite a powerful scale. Next, we're going to put in a standard camera. So this is standard camera number one. This will be from the position. POV stands for point of view. So we'll place the camera here, and the heroes will be over here. So this is from behind the hero. Now this shot will be at eye level. So our hero is going to be right over here, and you're going to shoot it right behind their heads towards this. And this is called point of view because this is exactly how the player will most likely experience this scene for themselves. So depending on what you're trying to achieve, you could use this camera. Now we could do an opposite standard camera, camera number C. Okay, so Charlie here is number 2. It's also a POV, but in this case, right, we're looking at over here. I need a drink. Camera number C basically is the POV, but this time instead of from the hero's point of view, we are going from the enemy, or in this case the boss point of view, over its shoulder. So this gives you a perspective of what he sees, or it, I guess, what it sees of the hero. So they'll be coming this way, we'll shoot it this way, and it gives you a different perspective of the scene. It captures very similar designs, but it tells a slightly different story. It might put the enemy, for example, in a powerful situation by doing so, depending again on what you're trying to capture. Okay, now let's go to camera number Delta. So D here is a crane shot. So this gives the overview. So I placed camera number D here, right in front of the subject matter. And we're gonna use a 24mm lens. So that lens is gonna give me an arc or cone of vision about quite wide, something like this, right? Something like that, a field of view. So this is gonna really help my clients see the entire scenery of what's happening here. And not gonna get too epic or big scale by using this camera because we are way above the subject matter. So, but this will help the clients see the design. Now, if we're doing this design purely as a marketing piece or something to show, say, producer types that want to just get a sense of the scene, the feeling of the game, well, we might not choose this angle. We will, let me take a drink. We'll most likely stick with camera A or camera B for something like a marketing piece. Camera D here is mostly for internal use, probably something for production. Now let's do the last one here, crane number Echo. So this is another crane shot, similar to the POV of number C here, except this is shot from reverse. So it gives us the entrance design, because this shot here does not give us the entrance. This one gives us the entrance, but at the expense of showing the back view of our boss, which is not ideal. Now, for this example, for this episode, I've decided to choose crane number Delta. And the thumbnail, which I've done previously, will be shown here. Boink. Okay. So we decided to go with this because we are doing an HD redesign. Let's assume this is, because for something like, say, Baldur's Gate, it's existing IP. Most likely, the clients will not need to do any pre-production or pre-green lighting. Probably not, maybe a few, but probably not too much because the IP itself is extremely strong. They don't need to convince investors to make this new IP because it's existing. So for this shot, this is pretty much for internal usage. Again, I'm just making this stuff up. I have no idea how BioWare operates, but this is mostly meant for the 3D artist, the production people, the art directors to decide if this is the direction of the set. Not really meant to show to producers and wow them, as we say, like the wow factor. It doesn't have it, but it gives you a good overview. And since this is design cinema, the design is an important thing here. So let's focus on the design of the set. Now, I did draw out a couple other lenses, just as purely for examples. Let's open those up. Okay, now how do we go about the lens, right? How do we choose the excuse me there. Oh, that's cough number 2 that slipped in. All right, so these are actually alternate designs using different cameras. So I started with a perspective, and this gives me a kind of a close guesstimation of the lenses I'm using. So this is pretty much a 35 over here. It's not a 24. This is probably a 35 mil. This is closer to a 24. This could be a 24, could even be wider. This could be up to a 14 is probably not quite so, but quite a bit of distortion here. But I do like it. So this is my crane shot. You can see the horizon is very, very high. This one is my low angle, right? We talked about that earlier. So the horizon is very, very low. And actually, the horizon line is about here. And this is a standard. And you can see the horizon is here. So this is a human eye level. Whoops, I need another drink before I start sounding funny. Okay, so human eye level here, low angle here, high crane shot. And using those as my base camera, I could design right on top and ensure that my perspective and my foreshortening is correct. So here's shot number 1 with a different design. So here's the queen thing here with all its spiders around. And I decided to use some of the reference I had earlier, which is the nest here. I have some of those kind of mushroom shaped things I thought I liked. So just kind of make the cave a little bit different, but this does go away from the original BioWare version of this set, but we can always pitch these as alternate designs. Oops, let's put the shot here. This is shot number 2 over here. So this is a low angle, and you can see we can see a lot more of the ceiling because we put the camera low, and it gives you a very epic scene, even in a line drawing form. These spiders and this creature here gives it a very intimidating scene because they're all after you. They're all looking down on you. They're more powerful than you because the perspective here is here. So your eye line of sight is much lower than all the other subject matters here. All the spiders, the king or the queen is all above you. Take another drink. And because we have so much, we're using a wide angle 24mm lens here, we're able to capture a ton of the environment. And here's some of the things I was talking about earlier, the termite nest with all those shapes. I thought those looked really cool. Bunch of eggs, stacks of eggs, spiders here, and this kind of opening. Now I designed this here to allow the scene to have light. Of course, in video games, there's a lot of imaginary lights. For example, you play like Tomb Raider, you go into a tomb, you don't even have a candle, but the place is lit pretty well, right? So that's just for entertainment purposes. You get the same thing in movies as well. But it'll be nice to actually have maybe a kind of a realistic way to light this scene without relying on magical lights. So I opened up this cavern like a giant hole in the top so we can have light pour in to get the cave. Of course, when it rains, it'll pretty much suck for this guy. He'll get all wet. Okay, and here is the final version that I chose. So this is a crane shot high above the scene, and it gives us a nice establishing shot of the whole entire environment. And this design also sticks more closely to the original BioWare version. Wait. Yeah, it's BioWare, right? Yeah, it's BioWare. Almost meant like, is it Bethesda or BioWare? Okay, it's BioWare, right? So you can see here, it's a rounded nest design here, and we have it here as well. But we updated the design of how this could work. We also have placed the position of a hole up here. All right, so now this kind of concludes where we are in terms of what this episode is. But I did go ahead and finish this painting just to show you guys what it could look like. So here's a finished version of this scene. Let's zoom in here. Boom, boom. Let's try to make it big. And later, you guys could grab this off of my Facebook, or I'll put it on my blog maybe later as well. So here is the painting. I hope it's not too dark on YouTube. So let me just zoom in here. So here's the blob thing. Let's talk about design real quick. But actually, let's talk about camera. So this camera right away, because it's a crane shot, allows the viewer to see the entire scene in its whole. We're not cutting anything out. The only thing we're missing here is the entrance. So we could do a reverse crane that'll give us the entrance, or we could use this shot to even do a low angle. Let me turn on the layer here. We could do a low angle shot to kind of give us the epic painting if we needed that, because the design is already done. All right, now let's talk about the design. So I decided to make this guy instead of I think the original, he looks like some chubby dude, like a big giant bag of flesh. I decided to change him a little bit more like a spider-like design by giving him some compound eyes and some of these spikes that you see on caterpillars. The original one actually has some spikes on it as well. If you look really closely, it's probably really hard to see, but it has some black little spikes on him, some on the shoulders as well. So in this version, I give him the ones you see on those caterpillars, and they're really creepy. Added some red dots to give it a sense of disease. And the entire thing is covering this mucus, because this guy can't move. I have no idea what this purpose is. It's some kind of king. I'm not sure if it's laying eggs, but it's kind of encased in this semi-translucent mucus type stuff that we could really have the 3D team explore and make it really gooey and kind of nasty. It's kind of like gyrating, boom, boom, like bubbling as he moves below that. So I try to capture kind of this thick mucus film all around him. He's sitting in this nest surrounded by a bunch of eggs everywhere. You can see everywhere. And we have the hole on the ceiling that allows us to get some natural light, and lots of spider webs coming in, and the structure of the kind of a basket shape all around him. So that is the final painting. I didn't add the heroes in here because this is an establishing shot. Now, if this is a POV shot or a low angle, most likely we'll start putting the heroes in. But even in this case, we probably should put the hero in. If I had time, they'll probably be about maybe this big, something like that. So that way we get a sense of scale, because looking at this, we have no idea how big this guy actually is. So by putting a hero somewhere over here, get a sword, then we could kind of sense its scale. Now in this shot, the perspective is still there. Let me try out some of the layers. So this is my camera. And you can see here all the perspective lines are there to help, for example, the spider eggs. More drinks. They're following the grid, so that way we don't make impossible shot. The foreshortening is actually calculated as well, so that way the sense of scale is correct. When the 3D guys mock this up, they're not going to get a different result than what you have drawn here. So that's the grid. And this is just a standard. Let me turn this to normal. Right, so that's what it looks like. It's a grid on black, and I set that on screen. And by doing so, the black pretty much disappears. It becomes translucent, and you're left with the grid itself. And then just reduce this to whatever opacity you need to see the camera. So I usually leave it at about 8% or 5%. So it's just barely there, enough for me to catch it, but doesn't get in the way of painting. And then the last layer I have on top here is just a grayscale check. So we always check our values. So for these kind of things, refer to the previous episodes, because I don't really want to cover digital painting in this episode here. So yeah, that's about it in terms of what this episode covers. Let me zoom out here. Let's just do a quick review. So we took an old game, Baldur's Gate, which you guys could do as well. It's quite fun to take something that gets really, really old and try to do an HD pass on it as if they're going to remake it. And therefore, you don't have to spend too much time coming up with an idea. And this is very, very standard in the industry we're in right now. A lot of video games as well as movies are making remakes of their games or prequels and things like that. I mean, Star Wars just came out, and that essentially is the same IP from 30 years ago. So it's very common to do projects like this, and it's quite fun. And this is not fan art, by the way. Fan art is essentially drawing the same thing, exactly how it is, like you're drawing Ryu, exactly how it is. HDing something or making something, you're adding a lot more design back in. You're not sticking to the original source, versus fan art tend to stick to the original source. But of course, there's some gray area in between. So let's start from there, get your references, design your stuff out, and before you start even drawing, understand your cameras. So let's do a quick review here. Let's turn all this off. Right, your wide angles. or ultra wide, your regular wide, your standard 50s, your telephoto, which gets things to be really, really flat. Choose one of those. A drink. So far, 2 coughs. Haven't made 3 yet, so let's try to keep that. Let's keep that at 2. And then I'm going to choose the positioning of the cameras. We could put it very low. We could put it at horizon or eye level. We could put it as a crane, which you need a special equipment for. And that is what it essentially does, right? Pretend you are there, and by drawing something like so, let me turn the divider up, right? Take your set and draw a little 3D maquette or a mock-up of it. Really helps you plan where to put the cameras. Okay, so this is what we have our students here do, right? It really helps them see the scenes. You can actually go to our website and go under, I think, I'll put the link in the description later. You can check out some of the POV shots or some of the cameras that our students even do for some inspiration or some reference. You can take a look at that as well. But this really helps by imagining the camera as a real camera versus just grabbing it out of thin air. Like you just draw the scene as if there's no camera, there's no cameraman, there's no camera positions. Now, oh man, number 3 got in there. Let me take a drink. Now, this could be really, really in-depth. I haven't even covered how cameras used to tell story. That's a whole other layer of design. More in tune for movies, actually, because directors are very, very keen on where the camera is placed for certain scenes. And that goes into storytelling, the script, the mood they want to engage the audience in. So not only do you have all these things to think about, you have to think about what is going on in the story and place the camera accordingly to make someone weak, strong, scared, powerful, you name it, it's all there as well. So if you guys find this kind of episode interesting, I can always go into that in depth. Now that brings up another point, which let's put out this one too. Let me just do a closing here for you guys. Now, because I'm involved in several big projects at this point, I love doing design cinema, but it takes a lot of time off my day. I mean, doing this episode essentially takes my whole day to produce. So because there's a lot of planning that goes behind this kind of stuff, getting all the reference together, and writing a kind of a rough script of how I'm going to deliver this lesson to you guys. So it eats up a lot of my time. Now, I certainly do not mind doing that because I love design cinema. I love the support you guys have been giving us through the years here. And I certainly don't want to stop recording design cinema. So what I'm proposing here is perhaps we could move design cinema into a half kind of a demo thing like we're doing here and half into more of a podcast scenario, because I think verbally the words we speak and the knowledge we could share on this show is equally as important as the demos of someone drawing or painting. So that allows me to kind of record on a much faster basis, because all I need to do is do a mic or set up a camera or something like that, your standard podcast setup, and we just talk about subjects, and that could range from anywhere from design to games that came out to even films, but always from a design perspective, especially for students. So I'm thinking of doing that. Let me know if you guys think that's a good idea or not, because doing these kind of episodes is going to be much slower as I get really, really busy in 2016. But the podcast thing is not a bad idea, because I could place out pretty much maybe an hour or 2 hours a week. I go into a booth, we pick a subject matter, we talk about it, we'll have a laptop jacked in there as well, so we could put stuff onto screens, we could draw some stuff in real time, and basically just talk and share knowledge. And we can even have, for example, callers on Skype or things like that. We'll interact with some of you guys as well. So I'm totally up for that. It's quite exciting. Think about what that could actually do to the show. So let us know. But we might do a pilot episode within the next week or two. We'll try to set something like that up and see how you guys respond to that. But in any case, thanks for your patience. I'm terribly sorry for the lack of new episode for the past 4 months. But yeah, just work. It's just way too much work lately, and hopefully I could reveal what we're actually up to in 2 or 3 months as those projects come into light. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and please subscribe, and you could grab all these images from my blog, which is just search for Feng Zhu and blog. You should be able to hit it. So all right guys, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Any questions, put it below, and I'll see you guys in episode 87. All right, this is Feng signing out.